Hey guys, I'm back again on another rainy day in the spring of, I guess it's getting greener mountains of the Northeast. I just wanted to talk about NOS. It's a term that's been thrown around for a long time now. It's what it pretty much means is new old stock, and it applies to all kinds of things. One thing that it applies to, especially, it's kind of one of the first things, is vacuum tubes. Here's one that I just recently bought for a brown face Fender Deluxe amp that I have. One of the better GZ34 rectifier tubes that you can get, and this thing was like $200, which is insane. But once you kind of get used to that, I'd say about a, 3, maybe 2.5% increase in tone, you start chasing after that stuff. And that's one thing. Finding true new old stock vacuum tubes, especially stuff from Europe and some of the American stuff, it really makes a big difference, in that 2 to 3% range. But you hear it. The tubes are stronger. They've got bigger shoulders. They have better fidelity across the board, but they also are more dependable than a lot of the Chinese tubes and things like that. I mean, some of the Russian tubes are really good. And honestly, into China's defense, some of the shuang, however it's pronounced, those are fantastic. They make some nice. They're KT66s that I use in one of my amps that honestly they sound very similar to old Genelex, British Genelex KT66s that cost, who knows if you can even find a pair of those, that match out well. You're spending close to $800 to $1,000 for a set of those, whereas you buy the Chinese versions that are matched well. And it is a fraction of the cost, under $100, or at least they were. I have to check that. But the thing that kind of got me started is what I was just using on this first little bit of music here. This is a new production unit, Super Fuzz kind of Mark II reproduction by R2R Electric, DJ Lava Lamp. You can find him on Instagram. But the cool thing about these is that he's using new old stock parts to build these kind of new production versions of these pedals. And instead of it just being NOS tubes, vacuum tubes, it's turned into components now. A lot of it, I think it also, the transistors for fuzz pedals in general has kind of spiked that up, where you have, the lust for germanium transistors. And, one of the holy grails is the NKT 275 white dots, and then there's also the red dots, so the white dots being a little lower gain, for the most part. But it's real interesting to see how the market's kind of, gone a little nuts finding this stuff, and then how all these other, versions of things kind of come into the mix, where, you hear somebody says, oh yeah, this is germanium, but it could be some random germanium thing that hasn't been vetted, so it actually is a good sounding one. And the other thing with germaniums too is that they're very temperature dependent. So once they get a little too hot or even too cold, they will not function the same way. And that's, a lot of these newer devices, they caught on. And so you have something like this one specifically has a bias control on it. And you kind of heard halfway through where things got a little, when I started rolling off the volume on the guitar, the fuzz effect started getting, it got clearer and had, just bigger shoulders on it. And that has everything to do with the bias, to kind of how hot you're running the circuit. Take a listen here. I'll just run it here real quick. And what I'm gonna do is I turn the bias, down to I believe the coldest setting. And the volume is also part of that. Listen to this. So it has, the attack is at about 75%, the level is, like 11 o'clock, and then the bias is set way down. But listen to this, I'm just gonna play a chord and then I'll start turning that bias up and check out what happens. Control turned all the way up. The gain drops drastically. The headroom increases massively. So there's kind of some sweet spots in there, and honestly, with having a control on the outside of the device, it's nice because you can really experiment. I kind of like, on this one specifically, I like it, right around here or maybe right around here. So I kind of get the best of both worlds, with it a little bit colder. Like this, you're going to get more of a spitty, raspy sort of fuzz sort of sound. Here you get more of a, the big Marshall with the volume turned back a little bit on the guitar, and then the fuzz. So it's much more, well, lack of better term, more Eric Johnson, less Jimi Hendrix, if you get my drift. But the reason though, like I was talking about all this, so is really just for the fact that new old stock components make a difference. Someone like R2R Electric DJ Lava Lamp, he vets the parts, and it's not just the germanium transistors or silicon or whatever he's using in whatever pedal design. It's other things like resistors and even potentiometers and things like that. And some of these aren't completely new old stock, but they've been tested in that way. But it's just an interesting thing to see how the market's kind of gone towards this idea of kind of harvesting these old parts, because honestly, certain paper and oil caps and things like that, they're not made exactly the same way as they used to be, and they really can't. A lot of the vacuum tube production now, there's a reason why you don't see a lot of that in certain countries, and it's because of the environmental hazard and the health hazard of just manufacturing that stuff and all the regulations for these factories. And I'm sure that the same thing kind of holds true for some of these other components like transistors and resistors and things like that. But luckily there's, the world was powered on this stuff for many decades. So there's still stuff kicking around, but unfortunately, with things like these holy grail, like NKT 275 white dots, you're going to have a real hard time finding a stash of these anywhere. And then all the devices that have them now, the prices have skyrocketed. Certain fuzzes that have them now are, they're definitely $1,000 and over, and you get really lucky if you can find them, in any other thing. So it's it's a really neat time to be around, because we know we have people that are building new things with alternatives that work well, and luckily there's still a little bit of stock around. But yeah, you got to kind of hunt and pick. But I would say though that you get a nice increase in tone, but at the same time there's new components that you can get I would say an equally usable tone. It's not the same. It's never going to be quite the same as some of these older components, but you can find things that will do the job and inspire you in different ways. So, new old stock is not the beginning and end of tone. A perfect example, I picked up two of these silicon-based new model fuzzes by Maz Effects, something called a Sona fuzz, and they're fantastic. It's brighter, a little more intense than say something like this R2R electric, or some of the other types of fuzz like the Analog Man and things like that I like to use. But they're fantastic. He has controls on the inside, kind of like these have on the outside, where you have you have a tone or a bias control. Sometimes you have like an input gain control, which is almost like the effect that happens, like say, like with this here, like if I turn the guitar's volume, cock the volume back slightly, so we have. To 8 or even 9 drastically changes the character. It makes it more of an overdrive sound versus a fuzz sound. So I guess that's all I really want to talk about. I also wanted to just shed some light on R2R Electric, because I think they're doing fantastic work, and you can still find things that aren't $1,000. They're not cheap. You're looking at things that are in between the $300 and $500 range for, depending on how intense the build is. But if you're interested in finding something that has some new old stock components, say in an actual pedal or a fuzz or a treble booster or preamps and things like that he does, I highly recommend checking them out. And very stable, and well, I'm happy that I have this one. Makes me want to search out some more. But new old stock. I guess I'm new old stock.